Hello everybody, Shinjo here, welcome back to another tier list. So, I had this random thought after I recorded the gym leaders tier list recently. That video hasn't been posted yet, but it got me wondering. I covered the champions in a top 10, I did the tier list on gym leaders. Besides Frontier Brains, the one category that I haven't covered was the Elite Four. So, that's what I'm here to do today. To be quite honest, looking at this list for one of the first times, it looks a bit small, but then I realized there are a lot of characters that carried over from different gens, like Bruno in Gen 1 and Gen 2, and also Galar technically didn't have an Elite Four. But this is going to be tricky for me to trek through because the characters aren't put in order, and I can't be bothered to do that and spend time to do that, so I'm going to have to move around and figure out how exactly I'm going to do this. But obviously, I'm going to start with Gen 1, and we have the usual suspects, S, A, B, C, and D tier. I don't think there'd be anybody that'd be lower than D tier, personally, but I just didn't feel like adding an extra tier. So, the first one that I see from Gen 1 is Lance. And Lance is certainly an interesting one. I don't think there have been many times that characters have done what Lance has done. Gone from an Elite Four to a champion in the next game. And overall, Lance is just always there, and especially in the anime, his shiny Gyarados is iconic, so I have to give Lance at least an A. And Lorelei is a bit tricky because she technically has an anime counterpart, but not really. There was Prima in the Orange Island saga, but it technically wasn't her, but in a way it was. I don't know where the mistranslation came in, but besides that, she really hasn't had a massive anime presence, besides one-off things like Generations. But I think for Lorelei, I think I'll put her at least in B tier. Obviously, she's iconic in every Pokemon fan's mind because of obvious reasons. And the fact that in the Fire Red and Leaf Green games, the more you beat the Elite Four, she just buys more dolls, and that's honestly the most interesting thing I can find about her. Although looking at it, I completely missed Agatha and Bruno at the very start here. Agatha is like Lorelei, where it's not really her herself that's interesting, it's more the backstory and the supposed rivalry that she had with Professor Oak back in the day. That's pretty neat. And Bruno, legitimately, I think Bruno is a C tier. I mean, he must have done something right to get into 2 Elite Fours, but come on now. You say you're a fighting type leader and you have an Onix? And the worst part is you have an Onix after Steelix is already introduced. I don't know what you're doing, man. Not to mention that Bruno has had very little anime screen time. Now granted, you could say the same thing for Agatha only appearing at the end of Battle Frontier, but Bruno had 1 episode and he didn't even battle. Of course, I think it's Bruno. It might be a similar thing to Lorelei versus Prima. But that is Gen 1, and moving on to Gen 2, Bruno's already on the list. I still think he's going to keep a C tier, because somebody's got to be in C tier. But then as far as other characters from Gen 2, we have Karen. So, just out of curiosity, for anybody watching this, what is your one thing that you remember from Karen? Her quote. Honestly, there's not much else that I can even remember about Karen. She didn't have any screen time in the anime. She is the first Dark-type specialist, which is neat. But to be quite honest, I only remember her for that one random quote and nothing else. Now granted, it is a good quote, but still, it's just honestly forgettable besides that. And then we have Koga. So I think Koga is similar to Lance, where instead of going from an Elite Four to champion, Koga went from a gym leader to Elite Four. And to be quite honest, I don't remember where I put him at in the previous list, so I think I'll just put him in B tier as well. He's fine. I like that he has a Crobat, but there isn't really much else that I can remember from him. Will, goodness, Will. Where do I even begin with him? There isn't much I remember about Will. I think there's some rumor or something about how Will is Lorelei or something like that, since they both use Jinx and they're both the first member of the Elite Four that you face. I don't remember exactly what it is, but to be quite honest, I don't care enough about him to even remember or even check on it for that matter. D tier. Now for Gen 3, it's going to be interesting because I believe only one of the Elite Four from Gen 3 appeared in the anime. And we're going to start with the man himself, Drake. Actually, Drake appeared twice now that I think about it, which is kind of funny. So from Gen 3, we have Drake, Phoebe, Sydney, and somebody else. I'm trying to scan over this to remember. It is, I mentioned Sydney. It's Glacia. Okay. So I would say that Drake is probably my favorite, maybe next to Sydney. Oh no, wait, hold on. I had that backwards. Okay, well, let me put Drake up in A tier. I completely, you know what? Just for that, you're going in C tier. I was trying to remember them in my head, and I was going to say that Drake is the most interesting one. I still think he is, but I thought of Grimsley, and I thought of Sydney from Gen 5, because I was going to mention the cameo that he had in Sun and Moon, but that's not even the right character. So the fact that I didn't even have the right character in mind, especially since they're both Dark-type users, just tells you how sadly unforgettable Grimsley is. Or Sydney. I can't remember. Not to mention their names are similar. I think it's Sydney instead of Grimsley. But for the next Gen 3, Glacia is probably going to be a B. But Glacia is just honestly forgettable. And on top of not having an anime presence, doesn't really help to remember her. And finally we have Phoebe. I think just for the sole fact that Phoebe could be from the Alola region is enough to actually get me to care. I mean, if she's not from the Alola region, she certainly looks like it. And then we have Gen 4. Now, I love Gen 4, just putting that out there now. But that doesn't mean it's going to sway my votes. First up, we have Aaron, and Aaron is just honestly upsetting. A forgettable character, to say the least. And that's even considering that Aaron was in the anime. I do think it's neat that he has a Drapion when it's not actually a bug type, technically, instead of evolving from a bug type. But he's just honestly forgettable. I like the honeycomb pattern on his shirt, but it doesn't save him. Bertha is honestly a sweet old lady. I don't know if B is being generous. I think that's fair. I think I'll keep Bertha there. I definitely like her more than Aaron, especially since she has a neat team having mons like Quagsire and Hippowdon. But, again, a bit of a forgettable character. And I'll save that guy for last, so instead we're going to go to Lucian. Shoot, honestly thinking about it, a lot of the Sinnoh Elite Four are a bit forgettable in my mind. All I remember from Lucian is that episode where he battled Dawn and just beat her up with a Bronzong, even though I don't know the context of the episode, but I'm not even sure if he needed to. And that was his only time in the anime. And then we have the man Flint. I will give Flint props since he has an Infernape. But that's not going to save him. B tier. I do like that he has what little fire types Sinnoh has to offer. I know, Sinnoh doesn't have fire types. Very funny joke. Never heard that one before. But Flint, I don't know. The fact that I saw a video somewhere about somebody trying to defend why Flint has the mons that he has, like Drifblim being a hot air balloon, Lopunny being the literal definition of hot or something like that. The fact that they have to go out of their way to argue for Flint's team just tells you everything you need to know. And I think that covers everything from Gen 4. So next is Gen 5, and I think Gen 5 is where things start to pick up as far as Elite Four, in my opinion. Because I really like Caitlyn, I really like Grimsley, who else is there? Marshall's gonna go B tier. He looks a little bit goofy, almost trying to be an homage to Bruno. but it's fine. And I really like Chantal. Honestly, a very solid Elite Four outside of Marshall. What's wild is this Elite Four didn't really have any screen time in the anime. The only one that was ever shown was Caitlyn in black and white. Grimsley was never shown, Chantal was never shown, and neither was Marshall, unless I'm forgetting something. But we're going back down with Generation 6 because we have Drasna, we have Malva, we have... who else is there? These two goofballs, Seabold and Wickstrom. So, yeah, let's start in that order. Malva's at least a little bit interesting because she's tied to the evil team, so I'll put her in C tier. But in a way, I don't know. The fact that she doesn't really do anything as part of the evil team is a bit upsetting, but I think I'll keep her in C tier. Because we have Drasna, which, to be honest, I think I'm going to put Drasna in C tier. Wickstrom is going to go C tier as well. The only thing that saves him is Pokemon Journeys, where he was shown and constantly talking about chivalry. That's the only thing that saves him. Seabold is just kind of bland. I'm going to put him in D tier. The whole thing about him talking about battles being considered an art and just going on and on about being a chef or whatever he is doesn't really matter to me. I don't really care. Almost feels like he's trying to be characters like Juan and Wallace. Then we're jumping over to Alola, which is funny because they technically didn't have a league until later on in the game anyway. But we have Acerola is going to be a B tier. Hala, I think, is also going to be a B tier. There might be people that really like those two characters. I'm in the middle, which is evident from this. I like that they're characters that you have interacted with before, but it doesn't really help. Olivia, on the other hand, is going to go in A tier. Molayne is going to go there, and Kahili is going to go there. Which is weird and funny because I'm pretty sure I put Olivia in the same tier when I was ranking gym leaders. But it's also funny that I split up Kahili and Molayne because they're both characters that were thrown in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. But for some reason I like one over the other. I don't know, the fact that Kahili has that whole golf sort of aesthetic and a Toucannon as her ace is really neat. Plus the golfing episode of Alola was pretty fun as well. Molayne, honestly, I'm starting to think I just don't care for Sophocles or Molayne for that matter because I ranked both of them really low. Although it's funny that Molayne is right next to Wickstrom, being that they're both steel users. Then we are at Paldea. I certainly didn't have to do that pause to remember what the region is called. So, let's just start in order. Hassel is probably just going to be B tier. The fact that he cries uncontrollably for seemingly no reason whatsoever besides just being overjoyed does get old after the second time that you see it. I do like that he's a teacher at the school though. Larry, I'm saying the same thing that I did before. Larry is honestly overrated in my opinion. I don't know why everybody loves Larry besides the obvious joke of, haha, I hate my job, funny. It's never really appealed to me. But then we have Poppy and Rika, and both of them are going to go in A tier. I love, first of all, that Poppy's ace is Tinkaton, really fitting. But also, I love how a small little child has the massive steel typing. It's just really funny to me. Rika, what am I going to say about Rika? Everybody almost unanimously loves Rika. That leads me to who is going to go in S tier. And I think we are going to do this. Lance goes in S tier between two. And I think I'm going to do this. I think that's really fair. I was thinking about putting Poppy in there, but realistically, I just like Rika more. It's also very fitting that we have the old gen and the new gen at the very top tier. And then all the other gens sprinkled in between. But that is going to do it for my Elite Four tier list. Again, this is an idea I came up with right on the spot. I don't know any other tier list that I can do because I've covered all the Pokemon, I've covered the gym leaders, I've done the champions in their own top 10. The only thing I can think about is Battle Frontier dudes, but I don't know if that's worth making its own video. But if you enjoyed, hit that like button down below, subscribe if you haven't. If you have any other ideas for tier lists, let me know down below, and I'll see you next time. Momentai!